Followers of the CFF site and college fantasy football enthusiasts, it's been a while since I've been behind the microphone, but I'm here, back. Finally, good to be talking college fantasy football again. I've received several emails over the past couple of weeks asking about how to create a college fantasy football this season with what's going on. And quite frankly, I was sending out a lot of emails, felt that I was copying and pasting the same emails to a lot of folks. And I knew that there were some answers that were coming. It was just going to take some time to get some news coming in from these conferences from around the country, Power 5 schools, Group of 5 schools. Some we know what's going on. Some we're a little up in the air with what's going on right now. But I think we have enough information right now to at least start getting some ideas of how to run our college fantasy football leagues in 2020. And it's going to be a mixed bag. There's going to be some that I think, they may be pleased with some of the suggestions I make. Some it may lead to more questions, but this is a great starting point. I feel like we have enough information right now that we can start forming some leagues and putting some things together for you guys. I think in the redraft formats, it's going to be a little less challenging than some of you guys that have any type of a keeper format, dynasty formats. I think it gets a little more complicated for you guys. I'll kind of think some things through. We'll slow it down, keep it really informal. While I thought about the format of the show and some of the things that I was going to talk about, every time I thought of something else would come to mind. And so this may be one of those shows where I may think of something in the middle of showing you a graphic or in the middle of just making a point. But with that being said, today's Thursday right now, and I believe it's Thursday, August 6th, and we were supposed to get news today on what the MAC was going to do in regards to their fall football schedule. We were told today, it was announced that they're going to delay that decision, I think, until the weekend. But I think we have enough from all of the conferences right now to at least put a plan together on what to do for 2020. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to just kind of pool everything that the conferences have put out so far, put it up on a graphic, show it to you guys, share with you guys. And what we're going to do is we're going to continually update these pieces throughout the preseason. We're going to put them in our preseason fantasy draft guide as well. There's a bye week section in there. We'll continue to update the bye week section as we get the updated schedules, particularly from the Group of 5s. It seems like we know what's going on, at least in the ACC, the Pac-12, and the Big Ten, where it seems like we've got some concrete schedules set in place. We have things from all the conferences in regards to start dates, when they're planning on playing their conference championship games, and even tentative dates if they have to move some things back because of cancellation, postponements, or makeups. So we're going to get all into that. We're going to get into, different formats, head-to-head, total points leagues. We're going to try to cover it as much as we can, throw out as many ideas as we can. And hopefully, like I said, this isn't really to say you guys should do it this way, but this show really is just to put some ideas on the table for you guys. Get with your fantasy managers, your owners throughout your league, put some ideas together, have a vote on it, and go from there. But it looks like right now, the good news is we're getting schedules, and it looks like we're going to get some form of a college college football season, which means we've got to have some type of college fantasy football season. So fingers crossed, we're not that far away. Some teams are already starting camp. We're going to have some teams start earlier than others. But we're going to get into all of that on the show. And so we're going to do that. We're going to cover that starting right now. So I think what we need to do is I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you guys, is start with some of the basics, with what we actually know right now. So let's start from the back and work our way up front. What do we know? Well, we know that the championship game dates right now. We know that the AAC has pretty much, it seems to be, that they've announced that their championship game is going to be on December 5th, 12th, or 19th. They have made an announcement that if Navy does qualify for that championship game, because of the Army-Navy game right now is still scheduled for December 12th, that it looks like that championship game would probably be on the 5th or the 19th, but the 12th is an option should something get pushed back and they need another play date. The ACC has released a schedule already. I believe most of that schedule is set, and they're looking at a championship game date of December 12th or the 19th, should they need a tentative date pushed back. The Big Ten has also announced December 5th or 19th as possible dates for a championship game. They're starting earlier than some of the other Power 5 conferences. We'll get into that. The Big 12 has not released a schedule yet, but they're already showing that their championship game will be on the weeks of the 5th, the 12th, or the 19th. So they themselves have given themselves a 3-week buffer as well. And of course, those 5th and 12th dates are probably if something were to get postponed and needed to be made up. We're going to skip down to the Mountain West Conference because they just recently released last night saying that I think they're going to an 8+2 format, and their championship game also December 5th, 12th, or 19th. And then the Pac-12 has set a tentative date for their championship game on December 19th, the SEC on December 19th, and Sun Belt right now is still they still have their game planned for the original date that was always set on December 5th. Conference USA right now and MAC really are the only schools that were conferences that were really waiting for something, I think, a little bit more information. But what we're hearing from scheduling right now, Conference USA is greenlit to start. They're probably going to be starting in the week 0 to week 1 range. It seems to me now, even though we haven't gotten anything official from the MAC, I may be a little bit ahead of this. But we'll see. This show is going to be uploaded onto the site before the MAC makes an official announcement. But I did see that Bowling Green did officially release something today that they are pushing back the start of fall camp by 1 week, and they're ready and excited to get the season started on the week of, I believe it's September 19th. If you want to read into any of that, then that would suggest that they are going to be starting somewhere with their games around weeks 2 or week 3. So we'll see if that's kind of foreshadowing. Their announcement is a foreshadowing into the MAC announcement that we'll get this weekend. But I wanted to start backwards at the end to go ahead and get into some of the graphics of what we know. As you can see, this is what we are going to be updating as it comes in. You're going to go ahead and see the bye weeks up there. They're already listed in there for you. Go ahead and minimize some of this out, make it a full screen. So what we did is we started with week 0, August 29th, and it runs all the way to December 5th is week 14. Now, what we do know so far through the Big Ten, right, and we'll start with the ACC, is you can start with the bye weeks. We didn't put individual teams because the ACC, they are not playing week 0, week 1. But if you look down here, if you look at the bottom of the screen, you're going to see that they actually start playing in week 2. So all of these play dates by the ACC are in play for the college fantasy football season. The Pac-12 will not start until September 26th. You can see that means there are no games for the Pac-12 the first 3 weeks of the season, or the first 4 if you include week 0. And as you can see down here, and the same with the SEC, and same down there with the Mountain West, their play dates are pretty much lumped into these areas right here. So you've got the ACC going through December 5th. You've got the SEC going through December 5th. We've got the Pac-12 starting on September 26th and going through December 5th. We've got the Mountain West starting on September 26th, going through November 28th with the conference championship game after that. You can see the Big Ten starting earlier, right? They're starting September 5th. To me, the Big Ten is the monkey wrench in the college fantasy football season, but I have some thoughts. I have some ideas, and I'm going to go ahead and get into those as we go. The Sun Belt Conference, as you can see, there's no indication that they won't start early. They've already announced that their conference championship game is going to be on December 5th, which means all of these games by the Sun Belt Conference, all of these weeks are likely in play. They're going to try to play as many games as they can. Same for the AAC. We know approximately when their championship game date is going to be. We think it's going to be around December 5th. As we mentioned earlier, they said 5th, 12th, or the 19th. And so that means all of these dates for the AAC are in play. Now, the Big 12, we don't have a set schedule from yet, but we can assume from what we've heard that the Big 12 will play a conference-only schedule for sure, which means that all of these dates are in play all the way from September 26th until November 28th. And then any non-conference games, you would assume they have not been ruled out from starting this early. So any of those first 4 play dates are still in play for the Big 12. The same with the MAC. I mentioned Bowling Green hinted they're starting their season, I believe, on their press release came out. And let me just double check that while I'm with you guys. Their press release basically said that they're looking forward to their first game on September 12th. If their announcement is any foreshadowing of what's coming from the MAC, they could start they could start as early as week 2 of the season, but this is probably going to be their conference slate, and they will have non-conference as well. That'll be scattered throughout. You would imagine Conference USA, who we still have to get something concrete from, are in the same boat. So why do I share this graphic? Because this is where I think it's really important for a lot of you guys. To me, this section up in here, week 0 through 3, those are the wild card weeks. This is the reason why not many of you guys really are. This is the reason why you're stumped about what to do, because there's not a lot of clarity right now in week 0, 1, 2, and 3. And so I've got some thoughts. I'm going to throw this out. And this is really what I think is probably going to be the best case scenario for college fantasy football seasons in 2020. And there's going to be some rumblings. There's going to be some disagreements. I get it. But I'm looking at it and trying to be really fair to scheduling and owners, and even those that are in keeper leagues as well, particularly when it comes to drafts. I'm going to box something off on here. And let me go ahead and update this graphic here. These weeks that I have boxed off, week 3 through week 13, in my opinion, if you are going to create a college fantasy football season, this is the part of the college football schedule that I think you want to use. Okay. A lot of emails coming into me, what are we going to do about some teams that have 12 games, some teams that only play 9, some teams that only play 10? It's not fair to use somebody 12 times and someone 9 teams. I couldn't agree more. But also on the flip side of that, if we're going to have a college fantasy football season, we also can't worry too much about the buys. What we're looking at is the most overlap in the schedule amongst all the conferences, particularly if you're doing it in full FBS formats. Now, remember, right now, I'm breaking it down for full FBS formats. If you want to use this graphic and say, you know what, the SEC, the Pac-12, their schedule seems to parallel one another. Let's create a league with SEC and Pac-12 only. The ACC, right? That you can use the ACC in that as well, because the ACC, even though they start 2 weeks earlier, you could take those out and run them with SEC and Pac-12. Now, when you look at the schedule, someone might say, well, we're losing 2 games from the Big Ten if we just use this schedule. Yes, you're losing 2 games from the Big Ten, but this is why I extended the box over here. because we're subtracting a game out from the SEC and Pac-12. So if you're going to lose a game from the Big Ten, you also should lose a game from the SEC and Pac-12. And to me, that evens out the schedule a little bit. You won't have the SEC and Pac-12 in week 1. You'll be playing without the Big Ten in week 13. Okay, so for me, when you look at all the conferences and this week right here, more than likely, other than the SEC, Pac-12, and Mountain West Conference, you're probably going to have a pretty close to a full slate of games other than those 3 conferences throughout the FBS. If you wanted to tighten it up and go week 4 to week 13, you could do that too. But then you would actually lose another week of the Big Ten, and anyone with SEC and Pac-12 players would actually not be penalized. So, and not that we're looking to penalize anyone, but we're trying to incorporate the conferences, each conference, as much as possible. In my opinion, if you're playing any type of a league format, redraft format, this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 week span throughout the 2020 college football schedule is your college fantasy football season. I think it's that simple. I don't think there's no reason to complicate it. I don't think there's any reason to worry about all of this section, weeks 1, 2, and 3. You can treat them as regular weeks on the waiver wire. We can treat them as preseason games. We get to watch teams evaluate players. You can still activate your waiver wires to start and run on a Sunday or Monday or a Tuesday. You can still pick up players week 1, week 0, week 1, even week 2. But in my opinion, week 3 should be the start for many college fantasy football seasons throughout that are being created. Now, I think that's the real simple part, because I think from there we go to what format do we actually use? And so when you have an 11-week schedule, all of a sudden now head-to-head, you can still do head-to-head, but are you going to do head-to-head with a playoff? Because if you have a playoff, you probably need to play minimum 4 teams. You probably need to minimum have 4 teams qualify for a playoff, which means week 12 and week 13 would be your playoffs. And now all of a sudden, you're looking at a 9-week regular season. So how do you create more matchups in the season? I have always been a fan. If you've listened to any of my podcasts or shows over the last couple of years, you know that I'm a big fan of doubleheaders. In my in-house league, I even use triple headers. We play 3 matchups per week. That is a way to get multiple matchups in seasons. I'm a big fan of doubleheaders, triple headers in season anyway. I think it rewards the strongest college fantasy football teams over the course of the season, because over time, the highest scoring teams will usually end up at the top of the standings. And then that way, you don't have a guy who scored the second lowest points in the week getting a cheap win because he happened to play the guy that didn't update his roster and had the lowest scoring week of the season. So anyway, to make my point here is that if you're going to play a head-to-head league with a format, a playoff format, it's 2 weeks, I think. You go, top 4, play a 9-week schedule, and then maybe you play double headers, triple headers, and that way you do, in that instance, would be your head-to-head playoff format. Now, here's another suggestion as well. You use the same block in the schedule, and instead of playing a playoff format, you do it more more in record. You just keep overall record. You play the 11 weeks head-to-head. You create, whether you want to do single matchups, double headers, triple headers, that's up to you. The team with the best record at the end of the season wins. No playoff, straight head-to-head, across the board, best record wins. And let's be honest, whenever you're doing playoffs anyway, best record's going to get the number 1 seed. Maybe just because of the season, just because of what's going on, and because of the mess that happens up here in the front of the schedule, we just go ahead and do head-to-head format, record only, best record wins, second best record, second points, and then your tiebreakers would be your fantasy points. Another format that you could do as well is forget about records altogether. What you do is you just take the points that your team accumulates every week from weeks 3 all the way to weeks 13, and the most total points over the course of that scored over the 11 weeks is also your league winner. So no head-to-head formats. You just keep a total of your score every week based on the lineup that you put in. The team, the owner, with the highest point total, the highest cumulative point total at the end of week 13 is your college fantasy football league champion. And then you've got second place, third place, fourth place, and so on. So we've got a head-to-head format with playoff right there I just mentioned. You've got a head-to-head format with no playoff, just best record wins. And then you also have a format in which you do total points. Now, there are some other suggestions. Now, here's something that I didn't mention as well. And let me get back to the schedule, because these 2 games by the Big Ten, someone would email me and I could see a question coming in. Well, I don't know if it's necessarily fair for anybody that would want to draft anyone that would want to draft Justin Fields #1 for Ohio State, because you're going to lose Justin Fields over 2 games and you won't possibly have him for the championship. And so would someone entertain the possibility of maybe picking a Sam Ehlinger that when the Big 12 schedule comes out may get a full slate of games, or at least get maybe only 1 or 2 buys in that section, and then you have him for the championship game? And here's my answer to that. As long as everyone in your league knows what's going on before the draft, there is no such thing as anything being unfair, because everyone's going into the draft knowing the format, knowing the schedule, the way that it's laid out, and then you have to draft accordingly. That is the part of being a strategic college fantasy football owner, college fantasy football manager, is that you are then going to tailor your draft according to the format of your league. So there's no such thing as being unfair in a redraft league if everyone is going in knowing the rules and the format of the league ahead of time. Now, things do get complicated in the keeper leagues because guys that have Justin Fields, there's no redraft, right? And so for you guys that are in keeper formats, dynasty formats, it is a lot tougher. You're going to have to take some bits out of this show and realize how you want to do your season. And I don't know if that means expanding rosters for one season and having some type of a supplemental draft to cover the first 3 weeks of the season with the expanded rosters, and maybe guys that didn't get taken in your original draft, you're not allowed to keep them over. I don't know how you guys want to do that. That is a little more challenging for you guys in those keeper dynasty type leagues. The more ideas that you come up with, send in to me. I'll try to forward those out to give other people some ideas. But to me, I think you guys are a little bit more stuck than most of us. But like we said, these are unusual circumstances. This isn't going to happen every year. And I think even for you guys, the one thing that you have to do is there has to be fairness in the schedule. And I still think the box of games that I have highlighted right there, that's still the block that you're going to want to go to in your season as well. Now, I could see questions coming in. Well, why don't we just use the first 2 for the Big Ten, and everybody, Justin Fields' first game of the week of September 5th will be week 1 whenever. I think you're getting into a headache there. I think when you get into situations where you have to manually track what these guys are doing, what I am trying to do is trying to make as simple as possible for you guys to create your leagues on Fantrax, to let the Fantrax commissioner run it to let the Fantrax game manager run it for you, and for you guys not to have to make many manual adjustments to the league. Like I said, it's unusual times, and it's unfair that some of you all are going to lose, some players for this part of the season. I mean, the non-conference part of the season. But all of these games right here, and I've been saying this ever since the season was in doubt, or ever since there have been questions going on about what's going on with the schedule, all I told guys was to sit tight. We needed the overlap to come. We needed to see where the overlapping in the schedule was coming into play. You can draft accordingly to bye weeks. Here's the bye week grid. We are updating the draft day cheat sheet as the schedules come out per team. We're updating it at the end of the draft guide, which is where it's always attached. We're going to have bye weeks in there. We're going to have this graphic attached as well as information comes in on all the teams. And you're going to have an idea of where everybody sits, conferences and teams within the next. I really think we're going to know all of the schedules, and everything will be set pretty much in stone within the next 7 to 10 days. Now, there's some other things that we need to touch on as well that I think are really important, because this goes back to a hot button topic that was really big last year. And there was no way around injuries, right? So I had made a suggestion. There's no way on Fantrax. There's no auto sub system. It's something I've been advocating now for a couple of years. I think we need some type of an auto sub system within the platform. So if a player does not play and he's a last minute yank, you have some type of a backup. Last year, it was because of injuries. This year, we may see that because of what's going on with COVID-19. I would suggest to all commissioners out there that if you are going to create a league, you're going to run a league, and if you haven't done so already, and there are many of you that do this already, and kudos to you guys that do this, I suggest that everyone incorporate into their league this year that you have a tier three, a top sub at each position, quarterback, running back, and receiver every week. Whether you guys submit it to your commissioner via an email, whether you put it in your league chat room, I think you need to have a substitute at every position in case for some reason on Saturday morning someone is held out of a game, not just for injury, but for other reasons that we just didn't see coming. And then you have your automatic sub in for that week. I know that there's definitely a bunch of things that I want to, that I'm probably going to leave off that were running through my head. But while I'm thinking about those and thinking out loud while I'm looking at this graphic, and I'm just going to leave it up here while I'm talking, a lot of questions coming in. Are we going to update a lot of the rankings and the projections in the preseason fantasy draft guide and the preseason projection tool? And here's what I've sent out. We have the capability to make the adjustments in the projections, but with all of the schedule roulette that's going on right now, we feel the best decision are to leave the projections as is, as if we were projecting on a normal season, because in my opinion, based on the fantasy ratings that we have in the top 300, which is on the first page of that preseason projection tool, if we start changing some of the projections, it's going to really affect the ratings. And considering that every league, every college fantasy football league will have a different format and may use different chunks of the schedule, there's really no way to customize that. And I want it to be, I want the projections to be a true player A versus player B. And I don't want the projections to be a rating based on because one player has 10 games and the other one has 12. So we're not going to down the projections and change them based on the schedule. We're going to leave as is because I feel that it affects the ratings. When it comes to the rankings in the preseason fantasy draft guide, we have made a couple of adjustments already based on the schedule. You will not see many differences in the schedule, but I can tell you right now that there were two in particular that really jumped out at me, and I'll mention the reason why we made the adjustments there. Kent State, Dustin Crum, quarterback, Isaiah McCoy, wide receiver. We really moved them up in the player rankings. And the reason we moved them up for the reasons is that we know they are no longer playing Kentucky, I don't think they're playing Kentucky, Penn State, and Alabama now in their schedule. And so it's not that they lose those teams in their schedule. It's because if you're using the chunk of games that's in this part of the schedule, which I believe is going to be the true part of our college fantasy football schedule, the MAC games are mostly going to be conference games. The out-of-conference games, I think you're going to see teams like Kent State. You're not going to see them play Alabama, and you're definitely not going to see them play Kentucky. So Isaiah McCoy and Dustin Crum are two players that I know particularly that we moved up a little bit. On the flip side of that, Adrian Martinez, the quarterback for Nebraska, we actually moved down a little bit. Why? Because a lot of the ranking for Adrian Martinez had a lot. His high ranking had a lot to do with the non-conference part of the schedule. We were expecting him to come out of the gate really fast, go through some of that non-conference schedule, build up some momentum, and then Nebraska schedule really started, hitting some bumps in the road at the end of the year. Nebraska doesn't have that non-conference schedule that they originally had. And so for us, looking at Adrian Martinez, knowing that he's going to play that Big Ten schedule only, we downgraded and adjusted him a little lower. You're not going to see that, and you're not going to see many adjustments. We're not going to move guys down 2 or 3 slots because of all of the schedule roulette. But if we feel that if the schedule dictates affecting the ranking, we're going to go ahead and make the adjustments like we did with the Kent State players and like we did with Adrian Martinez at Nebraska. As you can see up here on the top, we're making, we're not going to have individual teams if everyone from the same conference is going to be off on those weeks, which is why that you see certain conferences up here. We're going to fill in the teams as we go. As you see, the ACC, the Big Ten, the Pac-12 have already released their weekly schedules. We've got the teams starting to fill in as we go. But guys, I left this graphic up here on the screen the whole time while I was explaining stuff, because I really do believe that everything within those dark black lines in that big, thick black box is going to be the majority of your college fantasy football season. It's where we've got the most overlap. Now, keep in mind, too, with the Big Ten, I don't know if I mentioned this, because here's another point, too, about leaving 2 Big Ten games out. And here's, I think, the caveat to the whole season. The Big Ten left these dates open over here because they may need to make up dates based on cancellation, postponements of games in the regular season. You have to remember, if there are any cancellations or postponements throughout this whole block of the Big Ten schedule, those games are going to week 13. So we possibly could have a Big Ten, there could be a couple of Big Ten matchups right there in week 13. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't want that to happen, because if we wind up getting games here for the Big Ten, and here's something to think about too, and this is why I say there's nothing that's unfair as long as everyone knows what's going on, as long as you're going into the draft. If we get Big Ten games the week of week 13, the week of November 28th, there's a good chance that a lot of these games in other conferences are going to be pushed back to other weeks. And so there is a chance that teams like, what if the Alabama LSU game gets postponed? It's going after the week of, it's going into December. So all of a sudden that is going to be an unforeseen buy that anyone that drafted Najee Harris or Jamar Chase didn't see coming. And so we can look here and say, well, the block that you have seems a little unfair for Big Ten if you drafted Big Ten players. But if there's any cancellation or postponements, the Big Ten's going to get the play date right there. They're going to be playing with everyone else. We may wind up getting 2 Big Ten, 3 Big Ten matchups. Who knows? Postponed. You may get 2 or 3 matchups the week of November 28th. However, I don't want that to happen, because if that happens, that means we probably got postponements all across the country. And that means bye dates are going to be littered all throughout, which is the reason why I think you need to go to expanded rosters. I think it's the reasons why we need to make sure that you're posting, you have some type of a substitute rule in your league. This is going to be a very different year, but I do think it's going to be fun. And I think it's going to be wide open when it comes to college fantasy football. I think for many of you guys that have dominated your leagues, I think you could be in an uphill battle, and it's going to be a dogfight this year because there is no telling what could happen. Now, let's address this because we never went here. What about best ball leagues? What are we doing for best ball this year? I think that's another tough one because with best ball, you actually have to have the physicals. We have to have the schedule for every team laid out up front because we have to know every bye date of every team. One of the intricacies of doing a best ball league is drafting players that don't have matching bye weeks, so you maximize your scoring potential on a week-to-week basis. Until we get a concrete schedule from the SEC, until we get a concrete schedule from the Sun Belt, Mountain West Conference, teams in the AAC, Big 12, MAC, CUSA, it's going to be impossible to have a best ball league until the schedule's tight. So I think if any of you all want to do best ball drafts, those are going to have to be, you're going to have to hold off on those and for another couple of weeks until we know the schedules of all the teams. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I do think you're going to have to hold off until all of the schedules of all the teams are known. And even while doing that, I still think the block that's in that black box is the section you want to use for your best ball leagues. Listen, all you need to do is go into Fantrax Commissioner tool. And instead of starting your league at week 0 or week 1, delay the league to start at week 3. That's all you're doing. You're making one change to the start of the league, week 3, the week of September 19th. You're ending it at week 13, the week of November 28th. It's up to you on whether or not you want to use a playoff system. It's up to you whether you want to use total points. It's up to you whether you want to use best record wins. But in my opinion, and I hope this graphic helps, we are going to track the schedules as they get released. But based on what we've been given already, I think that we have enough now for you guys to go ahead and plan your college fantasy football season, plan your college fantasy football leagues. We've got the preseason fantasy draft guide, the projections, they're all up on the site. We haven't really made a ton of changes. The reason we haven't made a ton of changes to some of the bye week stream, we put sections in the draft guide in weeks 1, 2, 3, and 4 in case you like to stream defenses, where a lot of these FBS teams had games scheduled against FCS opponents. We haven't taken any of that down. The reason we haven't taken any of that down because there may be a chance that some of these group of 5 teams may all of a sudden have to go back and dip into and play some of those teams. So even though the original matchups aren't set because the SEC isn't, they're playing an SEC schedule only, you may get a team from Conference USA, you may get a team from MAC, you may get a team from the AAC that plays one of those FCS opponents that could pop up on someone's schedule. And so we want to leave everything there for you guys to reference. We never really made a ton of changes to the preseason fantasy draft guide. The only thing that we are doing right now is we are going to put these sections somewhere in the exclusive content section with the preseason fantasy draft guide. We're going to make sure that this graphic gets in there, whether we have to expand it to be 2 different graphics, but we're going to put it in there. We're going to put it somewhere on the site as well. And look, guys, take a screenshot of this. Keep referencing this right now because I think right now, this black box that I've identified, and I said this over and over and over, I really believe that section right there is your 11-week block for a college fantasy football season in 2020. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. But I think that's the best bet for the season. I wanted to try to I didn't want to be too long-winded. I know I've repeated myself over, but I do think that that's the best bet for the season. I think you can go ahead and get your league mates together, go ahead and start planning based on what we have. Use that graphic. You can go ahead and start planning it. If you want to wait, my suggestion would be to wait another week before the draft. Start planning now. At least wait another week before you start drafting, because we're probably going to get a concrete schedule out from the SEC. We'll probably get more of a concrete schedule out. Who we waiting on the Big 12? Once we get SEC and Big 12, you Power 5 only guys can go at it. You've got all the conferences set with all the bye weeks. For all you FBS guys, full FBS. I think once we get a couple of more schedules in, and I think that's going to happen within the next 7 to 10 days, you've got everything ready to go for your full FBS schedule. So to put your FBS league together. So I think now is the time to start planning. There were a lot of you guys that had sent me emails back in May and June and July saying, listen, I'm holding off. I don't think we're going to have a season. I think we've come to the point now where, unless something drastic happens, I think we're going to get to the point. I think we're going to have a season. I think we're going to start the season. I think they're going to try to get this in as much as they possibly can. I'm very optimistic that the planning and everything's going to pay off, and that pushing things back was the best case scenario. I always thought that we would get a season that was pushed back. I didn't necessarily know if we would get any games reduced. I thought we would just lose the bowl season and push the season back. My guess is, based on what we're seeing, we are going to get a reduced season, and we are not going to get a bowl season. But it looks like to me we're going to have a college football season, and it looks like to me we've identified the part of the schedule that we can make our college fantasy football league. So that's going to do it for the show. I'm going to be back. We're going to do some more shows in the coming weeks. Obviously, a lot's going on. Camps starting around the country. We've got a lot of updates that are going to happen in the preseason draft guide over the next couple of weeks. We have some guys opting out of the season. We're going to have position battles. We're going to get news on that over the next coming weeks. But now is the time to start your homework for the 2020 college fantasy football season. It's go time. So look, one last time, my name is Joe DeSalvo, the voice of the CFF site. I hope this helped you out. Share it, get it around, get it all to your league mates. Create a think tank among all of the owners in the league. Get it going. But it looks like we're going to get a season, and we're going to talk soon. See you guys.